So it feels like a time of real crisis with divides deepening, be that about responses to COVID, culture wars, climate change, and the situation's only going to continue one way or another. And it made me think about Dante and whether the Divine Comedy genuinely has something to offer to us now. And I think it does because it too was written in a time where worlds felt like they were falling apart and indeed did fall apart. Remember Dante's fall from grace after the successes of the first half of his life, and then midway through the course of his life being exiled on pain of death, and how Florence, his beloved city, must have felt like it was only going to tumble into a destructive civil war, and moreover he felt the world changing, precipitating into what we now call the modern world. So what does the Divine Comedy have to say? It's partly a warning that hellish states of existence are real. People can become trapped by circumstances and their response to circumstances, whether it's a yearning for things that aren't real, the sense of only wanting revenge, being caught by rage, or giving up on hope, giving up on the good and light, and so falling into a frozen existence. The Inferno is a warning, but the Purgatorio follows, and this is the hope that even dire situations can be a chance to work on ourselves, to become aware of our vices and realise that they are just fallen forms of virtue, that born of ignorance, born of frustration, born of desire thwarted. There's always the hope that we can look up, remember the sun and the stars, and so use the time to realign with the light once more. Purgatory is a real state too. But that there's also paradise, and the question is not whether that's our natural state, our true destiny, but how we're going to return there. And paradise has things to teach us now too, that we can follow the qualities in people and the natural world, not just what immediately presents, and so learn to track the path back to the light by paying attention to good energy over foul energy, the effort to speak truthfully, even when it's mistaken, rather than just following the lies, the love of what's beautiful as opposed to what's ugly, detecting that round and about, recognizing that everyone falls short, and yet everyone, including ourselves, is destined for more. And Dante sees this in the figures that he meets in the paradise. He meets Piccarda, who, although she lived a life brutalized by her brother, realized that nothing could separate her from the love of God. He meets Cunitza, who, though she lived a wild life of mistaken love, knew that that energy could carry her to the divine in paradise for all its mistakes. He meets Thomas, who had disagreements to the point of declaring others heretics in life. No mean charge in the late medieval world, and yet sees now that his struggle for truth was their struggle for truth now, and that with paradisal eyes and perception he can recognise the direction of travel of his own desire for truth and that of his foes, which was towards the divine truth. So I think this means that now we can afford to be serious, but have a certain playfulness too, a certain lightness about our stance in the world, holding on to honestly what we discern and fighting for it, and yet realizing that it will all be transcended one day too, and that our task now is as much to be ready for that world made new in the way that we live now, rather than feeling that everything in this world must be preserved at all costs, because everything in this world too is destined for that new creation. It means that whilst we will fight for what we see to be right and beautiful, we don't have to fight feeling the goal is to defeat all other differences, because there is light in all human beings. Everyone's made in the image of the divine, and so keeping an eye on that light that's everywhere, as much as fighting for our own light, helps to remember that there is light in all and a light over all, including ourselves. Life is a labyrinth, Dante tells us, not a maze, which means whilst it can feel like we're moving away from the centre, ultimately there are no wrong turnings, and that might ease the tension within ourselves now. His vision is not of a synthesis or a city built on earth out of human minds. It's an image of a city and human minds that are capable of the divine city and the divine minds. And that's what we're readying ourselves for now. Life is a race towards death, as Dante says, first of all in the hellish state of mind where that feels like a curse, but then in the purgatorial state of mind that starts to feel like it gives meaning to life because of the quest for more from this life. That itself is meaningful because it is about the return to life in all its fullness and a fuller knowledge of the love that moves the sun and the other stars.